I really believe that God wants for his church to really change our minds about money. We have weird ways of thinking and what we believe. This hinders us. It might make you a little uncomfortable. And honestly, to me, that's my goal. I want us to grow in a wealth mindset. Most of our life is not what happens to us, but it's the decisions we make day by day. You can have a poverty mindset or a wealth mindset. I want us to grow in a godly relationship with money. Well, welcome to Wealth, Heaven's Perspective. This is episode 4. We are officially beyond halfway through with this. It's a 6-part series, so thank you for joining me and sticking around this far at least. Just to reiterate, the whole goal of this is I believe that God is leading the church into a time where we are really just changing the way we think about money, about finances, about resources even. And he's bringing us to a place of shifting our mindset to be one of wealth and really just the way he designed things. So I believe that's what's happening. These videos are just sort of an intro of sorts to the message, I suppose. So hopefully you've been getting a lot out of this, stuff to think about, stuff to consider, and even potentially changing the way you think. That's what I want to do. Even for myself, I've been on this journey of looking at my finances differently, of my wife and myself, just making different decisions and learning things and just really trying to stretch and grow and align ourselves more and more with God's way of doing things. So this is episode 4. The title for this, what we're going to focus on, is parables. In the sense of Jesus teaching parables and telling those stories, if you will, because he kind of told them in story form. Anyway, so there's 2 of them that I want to focus on. There is a lot in the Bible about money. There's a lot about finances. There's a lot on wealth and all that. So I'm going to zero in on a couple things, and we're just going to talk about it. So let's get into it. One of them I'm going to read. The other one I'm just going to reference, and then we'll talk further about both of them and give you a little bit of teaching and all that. So let's jump in. So the first one, and if you want to follow along, feel free to get your Bible out, is Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. So this is one that you're probably familiar with. It's called the Parable of the Talents. And all I know is I've heard many different teachings on this parable specifically, though I feel like it's been a while. It's not been recent. I've heard some that were really good and some that definitely took it out of context. So I don't know what your background might be as far as your understanding and the teaching that maybe you've had, if you've had any, on this specifically, but we'll get into that soon. But so let's just read. So starting in verse 14, Matthew 25. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered to them his goods. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his own ability, and immediately took his journey. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and produced other 5 talents. So King James way of saying he had 5 and he made 5 more, so he had 10. And likewise he that had received 2, he also gained another 2. But he that had received 1 went and dug in the earth and hid his Lord's money. After a long time the Lord of those servants comes and reckons with them. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought over 5 talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 more. His Lord said to him, Well done, You good and faithful servant, you have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter you into the joy of your Lord. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 more beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter you into the joy of your Lord. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew that you are a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered. And I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the earth. And there you have that is yours. Verse 26, his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and slothful servant, or lazy, you knew that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not scattered. You ought therefore to have put my money to the bankers. Then at my coming I should have received my own with interest. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it to him which has 10 talents. For to every one that has shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But from him that has not shall be taken away even that which he has. And cast you, the unprofitable servant, into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right, so there's a lot in that. I don't expect that I'll get into every aspect that parable brings up. So here's the thing. The first thing I want to address is maybe you've had this teaching, maybe you haven't. There is really no other concept or focus when you get into the context of what the scripture is talking about. This parable is about money. It's about resources. And then you could get into things about what a faithful servant is like and being faithful versus being lazy. There's other things you could pull out of it. But at the core, this is about finances. A talent, just to clarify, if you don't understand this, a talent is not talking about someone who is talented. It's not talking about a gifted person. It's not saying that when he created some people, he gave them many talents and some people with very few. That is not what this parable is talking about at all. A talent, and you could look this up. I'd actually encourage you to do some study on this. A talent was a unit of measurement or a unit of weight. It was used in the ancient world in multiple cultures. There were different civilizations that had different, that they might have used the word talent. If they did technically all use the same word, though it might have sounded different in their own language, I'm sure. And it came out to different weights. Their standard of weight was different. But a talent was a unit of weight. So here's the thing. When you get into what a talent is, you might imagine, and maybe it's easy to imagine it this way, when the master gave his servants the talents, a talent is not like he gave one person a single coin, he gave another person 2 coins, another person 5. A talent is actually a significant amount of weight. Depending on the context you're looking into, it was upwards of 100 pounds. And I don't mean pounds as in like European money. I mean pounds as in weight. Some of them, they were, it might have been Rome, I believe. I don't recall this exactly, so forgive me. But there were other ones that like maybe it was like 60 some pounds. Another one that was, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. But some of them were up in the hundreds. And from what I saw, and I don't know which one's 100% accurate because there were different ones that said different measurements. But the one that the New Testament would have been referring to, that the Hebrews used, would have been the one that was upwards of 100 pounds. So interesting side note, not what we're talking about right now. If you go back in like the Chronicles or the places where King Solomon is focused on, King Solomon, David's son, who built the temple and all that. it brings into perspective the true wealth that he created with and that was brought into him from other kingdoms, because it uses like the word talents and these weights of things. And when you really break that down, just do a little bit of basic math, it was massive amounts of gold and silver and all the other things. So just interesting. Can give you a little perspective on that. So then the other scripture that we're going to reference, and I'll give you a couple things on what's different, but was in Luke 19:11 through 27. It's basically the same parable, but it's a little bit different. And that's the parable of the minas, or minas, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. And that's, again, another unit of measurement. And it kind of plays out a little different, but the end result's essentially the same. So I'm not going to read that one just because it'd take too long to read both of them and say the things that we're going to talk about. But so you can go read that. It's interesting. It's actually a really cool one. So Matthew 25 and Luke 19 are the two parables that kind of parallel each other, though they are slightly different. These both are directly correlated with money. There is no other main thing you can pull out of it. When Jesus was sharing these things, he was speaking specifically about resources, finances, wealth, really. He was talking about wealth. And in both cases, it was a fair amount of wealth. It wasn't like he just gave some people a few pennies and was like, here, see what you can do with this. So it was significant. So even the guy who got the one talent on the Matthew 25 version, even one talent was a significant amount of money. Like, look it up and look at what that represented as far as like wages that a person would normally get. Even one talent was good money. Like, we're talking good money. So it wasn't like he was the worse off servant and, didn't know what to do with things. Like, he still got a lot of money. Like, he didn't get gypped. Anyway. So first thing to note, and this is still true for our lives, I believe. He gives everyone according to their own ability. It says that in, what verse was that? Verse 15 of Matthew 25. He gave to each according to their own ability. So, this kind of gets the whole thing about, fairness, and if you are on the line, I don't know where you're at, and I'm not going to go down this road except to say this kind of gets rid of the whole idea of socialism in the kingdom. God's not actually all about everything being equal, though he is about fairness, in the sense that for everything to be equal, they should have each gotten the same amount, right? But he actually says that he gave to each one according to their own ability. So it wasn't really about equality, but it was fair based on their own ability he gave to them. So anyway, and then the outcome shows the fairness of outcome as well. So our ability is directly correlated to our mindsets. And here's what I mean by that. Whether you have a poverty mindset or a wealth mindset, and we've talked about that in the last few episodes here and there, depending on the mindset you are operating under, the fruit of your life is going to show it. So what does that mean? The abilities you have, what God has trusted you with. Now, you might look at that and say like that you were just born with a certain amount that he has trusted you with. I actually believe that's not the case. I believe that as we grow, as we're walking with him, he continually is trusting us with stuff. And by stuff, I mean all of it. So whether that's vision, the call on your life, how you're walking that out, even down to finances and what he blesses you with, and the way that you receive things from him, that it's based on your ability to handle it. And here's the thing, because he knows, I'll use myself as an example. I'm believing for increase in my life, and I'm telling this is true, actual right now. I'm believing for increase. And currently, though I'm learning and growing, and I'm pursuing that, I would not be able to handle $1 million right now. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wouldn't know how to handle it properly. I wouldn't know how to structure things properly to actually set up myself and my family for prospering through that. And here's the thing, like you look at people who play the lottery, people that win usually, it's very common that people that win big money, they lose it quickly and they end up worse off often. And it doesn't go well for them. And why is that? Because when people who have a poverty mindset, and to have a poverty mindset also includes that you have no clue what to do with anything when it comes to resources. So that's why when you have it, you lose it. So it's like a cycle of poverty. You don't know what to do with it. That's my point. My point is that currently I don't have the ability to handle that kind of money. So the Lord is not about to bless me no matter how much I stand in faith about something. He's not about to just dump that kind of stuff in my life knowing that I can't handle that and that I'm not positioned to receive something like that. But there is an amount I am able to receive. And so I'm not going to go into all that. But the point is he knows and will give you based on your own ability. So I don't think I need to spend more time on that. Yes. So your life will show the fruit of the mindset that you are operating under. And the whole point of these videos is to introduce the idea that you can change your mind, that God's desire is for us to live with a wealth mindset. And I don't know if I've talked much about this, but I'm just going to throw this out there. One of the markers of a wealth mindset versus a poverty mindset is this. A poverty mindset will always be looking for a handout. A wealth mindset, even if they're facing a hard time, they're going to be seeing things through the lens of opportunity. A wealth mindset will always create solutions and find solutions, whereas a poverty mindset is going to be stuck in their stuff, and they're going to basically reiterate the cycle that keeps them there. So even if you were to give a big chunk of money to someone who has a poverty mindset, it's actually not going to do them any good. It's not going to change their situation, maybe temporarily, depending on the amount of money, but inevitably they're going to end up back in the same position. Now I'm going to stop with that part because there's more I could say on that, but not right now. Yeah. So the result in both of these parables, with the one in a poverty mindset, who is that? So let's point that out. The servant in both the parable of the talents and the parable of the minas, there was one of them who did nothing out of fear with the resource that was trusted to them by the master. So their poverty mindset made decisions out of fear, and they actually lost even what was given to them. In both cases, the master said, take the one that they have and give it to the one who has the most. Because why? The one who has the most, and this will get into the arguments of people who complain about those that are rich, and the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. The answer is, duh. Because those that have know what to do with what they have. And those that are poor, those that might be in poverty, obviously I'm not talking about exploitation and problems that do exist. But as a principle, even biblically speaking, he recognizes that the one who has a lot knows how to handle it, so I can trust him with that. And the one who has little, who responded in fear and did not do what was asked of him, he lost it anyway. So that's a poverty mindset. So the wealth mindset in both cases. Let me bring up the mina one because it's interesting and it's a difference. In the parable of the minas in Luke 19, there are 10 servants and he gave them 10 minas. So it doesn't say it so explicitly, but basically what you end up seeing is each servant got 1 mina. So 10 servants, 10 minas, they each got 1. The first one, in the same way that the one who had 5 talents made 5 more. The first one had 1 mina and made 10. Second one had, I think he made 4. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. You can read it. But it's like the kind of the same ratio, except that they each started with 1. So they actually started with an equal amount each, but then based on their ability, one made more and one made less, but still made more. And then the other one responded in fear and basically reaped the consequences of that, of his poverty mindset. So the wealth mindset did this. Each grew what was given to them and were blessed by their master. So here's the thing with the wealth mindset. I've hit this a few times. Deuteronomy 8:18 says that, remember, it is the Lord your God who has given you the power to get wealth. And then it talks about, establishing his covenant. So he's given us the power to get wealth. So when he trusts us with something, you have the power to increase. It is not, let me say it this way. We trust God, so we always make decisions from a place of relationship and trust and faith, never out of fear. So you can make decisions that might technically be the right decisions, but if you're doing it from a place of fear, the fruit is going to reflect that and it's not going to go well. One way or the other, it's not going to go well. Either it'll fail or just internally, you're not going to be doing well. So, all that. So back up to what I was saying. What was I saying? I was making a point and then I just distracted myself. Oh, man. Okay. Oh, no. It did it again. Okay, well, I had just a little lighting difficulty. So, as I was saying, I lost my train of thought for a second anyway, so this is fine. Let me reiterate what I was saying, though, is the wealth mindsets each grew what was given to them and were blessed by their master. So that's what I was saying, is we have a responsibility, regardless of what we have in our hands, to, one, obey God, but within that, actually taking responsibility for what we have and not just passively waiting on the Lord to show up and bless us abundantly. Now we trust him and he is the one who takes care of us and provides and blesses us, but it requires faith, and faith requires action. And unless he gives you direct instruction to do nothing and wait on him, and I mean direct instruction, then if you are being passive doing nothing, then you are actually not in a place of faith. So, wealth mindset is active, grows what's given to them, and it's blessed by him. And so here's the thing. It says it differently in both parables in Matthew 25 and Luke 19, but the reward for basically growing and multiplying what the master gave them. In Matthew, the reward was that they would be rulers over many things because they were faithful with what he gave them. Then in Luke 19, it says this. Still, it's about money, right? And the result of the faithful servants, the ones with the wealth mindset, is that they would rule, have authority over cities. So now we're getting into like governmental, and I don't mean government like, if you're good with money, you become the president. That's not what I'm talking about. And it's not actually about ruling like from a domination standpoint, but it's to speak of the authority that believers walk in, those that serve the master, those that walk with God, that there's an authority and a ruling over even material things. So here's what an eternal perspective looks like. I'm not going to beat this drum too hard because we've already talked about it. If your idea of the second coming of Jesus and what heaven is going to look like is that we just get to recline in paradise for all of eternity and we're just escaping this deep, dark, evil world, it's actually not what's happening. But if that's what you believe, then the decisions you make while you're here on earth is going to reflect that. Versus that he actually intends us to rule and reign with him, which is an action. It is not just sitting doing nothing and singing songs for all of eternity. That idea of heaven is, let's just say, inaccurate. Even scripturally, it's inaccurate. So, okay, moving on. So the reward, I'll make that point again. There is a reward to being faithful with what he's given you. The point of bringing this up, here's what I want to say. The message is not one of fear, because you could easily hear this and say, oh gosh, I don't want to be that wicked, lazy servant. And nobody wants to be that, right? But this is not a message of fear, but one of hope. And why is it one of hope? Because, like I said, Deuteronomy 8:18, he gives us the power to get wealth. We can change our minds when we say yes to him and his ways, and we line up with what he says we can do and has really given us the responsibility to do. So it's a message of hope, because regardless of where you're at with finances, with your mindsets, maybe you're in a poverty mindset right now. Maybe you recognize that. You can change. So it's hopeful because you can see, like, wherever you're at, however much you have, you don't have to have a lot of money to have a wealth mindset. You can change the way you do things. You can make different decisions. You can get intentional with what you're learning, with the decisions you're making. If you're married, you and your spouse can get very serious about shifting the way you guys do life because yeah, well, I'll just say that because it's worth it, but yeah. Okay, so he has given us the power to get wealth. The goal isn't how much money you make. The goal is not how much money you make. You might hear me talking about this and think I'm just getting into like the side of we should all just be disgustingly rich, and that's the point of this. And we're going to use God's principles to just get filthy rich and live a hedonist life or something. I don't know. But that's really not the point. The point is not that we would all have a certain number in our bank account. The goal is that we would begin to think the way he thinks and to change the way we think with following the actions that we do while we're here, because we have a limited time in this life, right? So to have an eternal perspective means today, not waiting for that forever tomorrow, but today making decisions that we will shift how we're doing things. And that's like leaving an inheritance for your grandkids. That's thinking of how we're building things, how we're taking care of the world around us, and not just waiting to escape. So the goal isn't how much money you can make. The question is, what are you doing with the resources he's given you? And I'm talking about resources. That includes money. That includes what you're doing with your life, the time, the way you spend your time, the dreams he's given you. Like, and I don't mean just dreams while you're sleeping. I mean, like, do you have a dream to do something, and have you let go of that? Because that's something that he has given you, that he's trusted you with, that without you taking those steps, it will not happen. So what are you doing with the resources he has given you? So here's what I want to leave you with. Excuse me. Based on Jesus' example, it isn't merely a stewardship of preservation. Really, just to be focused on preserving is to agree with the poverty mindset. To preserve what you have, to hold on to what you have tightly, just to try to survive. We've talked about that. People that are just in survival or security. That's a survival. Security is like to preserve, to hold on. If you stay there, you're basically agreeing with a poverty mindset that says that there's not enough, that your goal is just to make it, and so your life is going to reflect that. And you're not going to build and you're not going to do what he's called you to. So based on Jesus' example, it isn't merely a stewardship of preservation. Because as those parables showed, that's considered wicked. The wicked servant preserved the thing that was given to them and gave it back without doing anything with it. He preserved what was trusted to him, and he was considered wicked and lazy. So we ought, and I say we ought because I believe this is an area that you could say should, as believers, as sons and daughters of God, of the Father, we ought to have vision and action that follows to see growth by multiplication. And I'm talking about finances. I'm talking about family. I mean, truly, you think of finances. I'm just going to reference this. I'm not going to hit on it because I could talk for a half hour on this again. People that make family decisions based on finances. I'm sorry. I don't believe that that's right, because that is to agree with a poverty mindset that there's not enough, that there's not going to be enough. Now, of course, you might be in a situation at the moment that if you're married and talking about having children, that you might wait. Okay, fine. I'll give like a little bit of room to that, but I'll say like this much room to that, because I have seen over and over again that, I have 4 kids. Even if it doesn't make sense financially, somehow it always works. And like the Lord is the provider. He provides, he makes a way. So to make like family decisions. So that's what I mean, like to see growth by multiplication. Believers ought to see growth by multiplication. And I'm talking finances, their vision, what you want to build while you're here on earth, the dreams that you pursue, the way that you serve, the way you grow your family. It hits everything. To have a wealth mindset is to see multiplication happen. And all throughout these parables with the finances, you don't see that the one who is given 5 gained 1 more, and he gave the master back 6. Now, maybe that would have still been okay, but what we see in both parables is that they each doubled or more, because the minas did a little different. He actually exponentially grew. So, in the kingdom, things don't work the same as in the natural. When we align ourselves with God's way, you can grow things, you can multiply, and you can actually see your dreams and vision prosper. It takes work. It doesn't just happen automatically. But you align yourself with him and you see how things are blessed and how they begin to prosper. So, I'll say it again. We ought to have a vision and action that follows to see growth by multiplication. And I say action that follows because that's faith. So you can have a vision. You can begin to see things differently, and you should. But you have to have action that follows, which means actually taking the steps that you need to take and not just waiting on some kind of miracle to show up. And I believe in miracles. And if you need one, stay in faith for that. But faith also, to even have faith for a miracle, requires action. You have to take a step. So we ought to have vision and faith to see growth by multiplication. So that's it for episode 4 on parables. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for sticking around. And even through some of the technical difficulties, wherever they keep happening. So join me next episode 5, and we'll talk about some more stuff.